Hare Krishna. Good morning, or good evening, or good afternoon, wherever you happen to be in the world today. For me, it's New York City, and it's morning in New York. Pleasant day. Um, had a wonderful morning program here in Sri Sri Radha Govinda Mandir, and very, very happy to have our next episode and one of which I'm looking forward to continuing this ISKCON Future Forward series to explore innovation, to explore ideas, to explore uh, challenges in progressing with Srila Prabhupada's mission. So today I'm very, very happy to have an old friend and the son of an old friends on our show today, Akhandadhi Prabhu and Krishna Kishore. Um, they're they've been doing some work on trying to understand how to tailor the messages of Srila Prabhupada, the message of Lord Chaitanya, the message of Krishna to multiple audiences. And they did a study, in fact. But Akhandadhi Prabhu, many of you might already know him. He's one of my senior friends in ISKCON UK. I'm from America, so two sides of the pond, but has been serving in so many capacities as the one of the presidents, one of the early presidents, I think, of Bhaktivedanta Manor. Currently serving as a trustee of the Bhaktivedanta Manor and very active in the Bhaktivedanta Institute. And Akhandadhi, I only know you, Kumar, as the son of my friends. So I'm going to have you, Akhandadhi Prabhu, introduce Kumar.
Well, thank you very much, Pancharatna. Thank you for inviting us to talk about the study that we did together. You see, Kumar Krishna Das is on the call with us. Kumar is the son of all our dear friends, Kishore and Sri Kama, who were a long time at the Manor. In fact, they were both present at the Manor when I kind of joined. So I've known Kumar since his baby days.
Did you see him as Bhaktisiddhanta? That was you, right? Anyway, that's another aside. Go to the Prabhupada Memories and hear Kishore talk about Kumar. Prabhupada loved you.
So anyway, we're very pleased that when we had a chance to prepare a report on the outreach activities at Bhaktivedanta Manor, I got in touch with Kumar and borrowed on his marketing skills, because he's studied marketing, websites. He's a specialist in AI kind of applications. So he has a very broad understanding of what it takes to communicate ideas to the public. And he was an ideal partner to have for this project. And he recruited both his mother and his sister, also in helping do the many, many interviews that we had to do in order to compile this report. But you'll hear more about that as we go along. So I'm very pleased to come out with me today.
Thanks, Akhandadhi Prabhu. Very kind.
Thank you. Thank you. So tell us a little bit, okay, the background. So how did this happen? I think it has something to do with the 50th anniversary of ISKCON. Or no, not ISKCON, the Bhaktivedanta Manor.
Yeah, we were looking ahead to the 50th. This was the year 22. We could start showing some of the slides, I think, so that gives a little bit of an introduction to what we did. Good. Yeah, here we are, the Manor. My favorite temple. I mean, obviously, this is where I was born into in Krishna consciousness. Walked into it in 1975. It was magical then. It is magical now. And as you said, I gave many years as the TP there. And since then, I've always been connected with it in its development projects and as a trustee all these years. But we were concerned to see how we were balancing our outreach activities at the Manor. And this is what we're going to kind of go through. Are we really looking after our broad public? And it's the different parts of that public that we want to involve in Krishna consciousness. So let's just go through a couple of slides here. Don't take my word for it. Next slide, please. But Srila Prabhupada, no, I think you missed one. Did you skip back one? Oh, it's not appearing on this. Are we using the PDF or are we using the PowerPoint?
This is the PDF that you sent.
I sent a PowerPoint after that. Okay, not to worry. Anyway, Prabhupada said the famous statement, here at Bhaktivedanta Manor, the place is the nicest possible. And we were looking at our outreach activities. And Prabhupada, this is a famous quote from the first canto of the Bhagavatam, the expert devotees also can discover novel ways and means to convert the non-devotees in terms of particular time and circumstance. Devotional service is dynamic activity, and the expert devotees can find out competent means to inject it into the dull brains of the materialistic population. Such transcendental activities of the devotees for the service of the Lord can bring a new order of life to the foolish society of materialistic men. So this is our mission. Can we go on to the next slide, which is the purpose? The purpose of our study was to consider the specific activities and mission of Bhaktivedanta Manor in operating, supporting, and encouraging outreach initiatives, accommodated both on-site at the Manor and within its geographical remit. Next. And the phrase that kept coming up in our discussions was the need for increasing if we were going to increase the scope and effectiveness of our activities, we needed synergy and integration. And we define these as follows.
Okay.
Next. Synergy. How best to enhance the interactions of our various initiatives so that the sum of our efforts is so much greater than the parts.
Okay.
And the reason we were talking about that is we were seeing lots of activities with devotees very dedicated to making their little aspect work well, but how well those were connecting together for the benefit of our audience. That was the question. So integration, we wanted to coordinate the efforts, not by just strong management or centralization, but by improving communications, cooperation, and recognition of how those persons cared for by my program will benefit from involvement in other people's programs. That type of cooperation, communication, knowing what's going on, and be willing to link the people I'm working with those other projects. That was a key aspect. So we started with a theme that, of course, the GBC had coined, more devotees and happy devotees. And I like this motto because for many decades, I've had my own kind of personal mission statement that I just want to be a happy devotee within a happy ISKCON.
Okay, good one.
That's my personal mission statement, to be a happy devotee in a happy ISKCON and to play my part in both aspects. So how to achieve that? It was suggested that in order to create lots more happy devotees, we need to take our devotee audiences through a path, planting seeds, making contact with them. And now they've got contact with us. They are starting to consider, is this something I want to be involved with? And as they get involved, how is that changing and transforming them? How are they starting to adopt the practices? How are they becoming committed to it and saying, this is it, this is who I am in this lifetime? And then giving themselves to sharing that with others through advocacy. So that's the sort of path that we are hoping we can take devotees on. Next, please. And for this one, I'm going to, next slide, yeah. From this part, I wanted to bring in Kumar, because I think he really helped me understand the issues that we were facing. In simple terms, we were defining, there was a tension at the Manor, and the tension will be recognized by other centers elsewhere, that there seemed to be a difference of provision and emphasis and priorities given to what we considered our two audiences. And sometimes it was considered the Indian community and the Western community. And that, even that definition was causing tension and certain concern. It didn't seem right to be discussing in those ways. Yet there seemed to be an issue to be dealt with. And I think my bringing on Kumar helped to clarify that. So I'm going to invite him in a second, but just to quickly mention this point, that the Manor wanted to see itself as everyone's temple. They didn't want to kind of have this debate. Are we looking after the Westerners? Are we looking after the Indian community? They wanted to be everyone's temple. That was their branding statement. And that's very, very nice and, devotional mood. But becoming everyone's temple means that each individual who comes to the temple should discover the spiritual inspiration, fellowship, and engagement that they are personally seeking. Right. So it doesn't mean that you make everything the same for everyone. If you're going to be everyone's temple, you have to cater for everyone as they are as an individual. You have to know what they are needing in order for them to see this temple is also for me. That's the challenge. And we felt that that was not quite being met. In many ways, we were brushing over the individualistic needs of our people by trying to say, yes, we're just there for everyone. We're open for everyone.
Right.
But it's not as simple as that. We need to cater for everyone without necessarily catering for everyone in the same way or at the same time or in the same place and in the same circumstances. And this is where we needed to understand our audience groups. And I'm now going to pass over to Kumar to talk a little bit about this. And Kumar, you lead, if you want the slides to move. The next one is the audience groups.
Okay, I'm not necessarily sure what's coming next, but what's in front of me looks good. So, yeah, so as Akhandadhi Prabhu has mentioned, I have some background in marketing and something else that funnily enough is called conversion rate optimization. But in this marketing sense, it's not about converting people, but it's kind of ironic and funny that maybe came to bear here. Conversion rate optimization is about if you're reaching out to 100 people, hoping they will either become a customer or become a donor or become a giver, you're looking for some sort of engagement. And if you reach out to 100 and 5 of them engage, then that's the 5% conversion rate. So the idea is what can we do to like optimize and make things better? So if we reach out to 100 people, 10 or 15 engage and become customers or something like that. So that's the context from a marketing perspective. But some of this kind of came to bear and felt very relevant here. And so one of the main principles is something called cohort marketing, which is a very simple and common sense idea. And that is just that rather than trying to reach out and, as Akhandadhi Prabhu is saying, try and create something that's going to fit everybody, if we recognize that the reality in our world is that people kind of either break themselves down or society breaks them down into kind of different groups, different cohorts, if you will. And there are so many different ways that we can group people, or that people are grouped. And one of the most obvious ways is demographics. And this is very based on external stuff. So our age, do we want to group people by age, seniors and youngsters, or by gender, or by income, education? So these kind of things, the demographic cohorts, which are legitimate cohorts, are based on externals, and one of those is ethnicity, and that's an important potential cohort or grouping that you can do. The trouble is that if you look just through the lens of demographics, it can become quite reductive. So the idea that if we're looking through the eyes of demographics and we start thinking of, okay, what Western, okay, well, firstly, what does that even mean? Or if we're saying, okay, Asian or British Asian, okay, that's an ethnic group, that's DNA, that is that's a thing. We recognize DNA and ethnic groupings, but does that mean that everybody within that group is the same? Obviously not. We know that. And some of, I think what's perhaps been a long-standing issue and there's tension is where people are trying to look at, okay, look, there seems to be a fantastically vibrant, thriving community of people and activity happening in a temple situation, and it may outwardly look like it's mostly people from one ethnicity. It may be Asian, British, or any other, but looking at it just through the lens of demographic doesn't capture it. And so the second grouping there is psychographics. So that's internal states. And that's kind of getting closer to the spiritual stuff, really, in terms of we go from the gross external stuff, and now we take it one layer under that, and we look at psychographics, which relates to people's psychology, their interests, their beliefs, their attitudes and their aspirations, lifestyles, things like this. And so I think when we start looking at things through the lens of psychographics, it starts getting a bit more nuanced and closer to what we're actually finding. So rather than us thinking like, okay, let's think in terms of, Indian Hindu community and, what Western community, and what does that mean? Is that like white? This very binary. And even as I say this, I suspect that people listening are probably already feeling uncomfortable. It's like, what? This is getting into like racist territory. This is uncomfortable. And then I think what happens is people want to step away from this conversation, and it kind of gets a bit murky, and then we actually lose something that is important, which is this idea that there are natural segments of people. And so where we came to here was looking, well, what's the psychographic groupings that are important and valuable for us to be looking at? And so the groupings, the psychographic groupings, and Akhandadhi Prabhu, you'll know if it's on the next slide or not.
It's on the next slide, yes. Let's go to there we are.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So
by the way, just inserting here, Krishna does this. Chatur, the different types of people. Chatur Vida, Bhajante Mam. He goes to the psychographics.
Yeah, and so the two pertinent psychographic groups here, we've got familiar. So has an upbringing or background making them familiar with aspects of Vedic, Hindu, Indian, Vaishnav culture and religion. Now, if we had been really blunt and we were trying to do this on the external stuff, the demographic stuff, we'd be like, okay, what? So like Indian and Western? Actually, interestingly, the familiar group statistically will have many, many more Indian-bodied people. But do you know what? I'm in this group as well. And so are my children. So clearly, the nuance is there. And also, psychographics and demographics, they relate. Of course they relate, because someone's demographic, where their parents' heritage is, the color of their skin, and therefore how they've maybe felt as a minority group or otherwise, it affects people's life experience. And so it does affect the internal stuff. And so to recognize that there will be statistical differences or traits that often are associated with different ethnic groups or different demographics, but that doesn't mean they're caused by it, or you don't have different scenarios like me. You know, I'm familiar. It's got nothing to do with the ethnicity in my DNA. And so I think when we realize that the distinction happens on this psychographic level, it becomes more comfortable. It's less I've forgotten the word. What is the word? Less reductive. Less reductive. It's more nuanced. It's looking at the internal experience. And so then we've got the familiar here, and then the non-familiar. So has little familiarity or background with Vedic, Hindu, or Vaishnav culture and religion. And so, okay, so say in a context that I'm more familiar with, which is in the United Kingdom, I'd say, you know, most people in the United Kingdom would fall into the non-familiar category. And like, if we wanted to draw Venn diagrams, you know, of the non-familiar and the familiar, and then we wanted to look at what's the circle in the Venn diagram of different ethnicities, yeah, there might be a lot of overlap, but that's just not the point. The point is, let's look at the psychographic, familiar and non-familiar. Akhandadhi, let me bat it back to you for a moment.
Okay, well, I'll have a bit of fun with these. We've made a couple of charts just to give a flavor of the psychographic, psychological differences that exist between someone who may be familiar and someone who is not familiar. Sorry, could you go back to the one you were at? Yeah, for instance, the Gita. Those in a familiar background recognize the Gita as a sacred book, whereas others are wondering, what is this? Ancient ideas, you know, what is it? What's all this about? Krishna is a god or God. Who's Krishna? Thinks the non-familiar person. Where are you bringing that in from? They've been to a temple. They know what to do when they go there. They know how to behave. Whereas someone in the non-familiar category just may never have been inside a temple. I actually was never inside a temple until I walked in to join Bhaktivedanta Manor. Yeah. But I was very pleased when I did. But many persons, especially these days, from a non-familiar, we see it in Britain, they're very hesitant to go into a cultural situation where they might cause offense, where they don't know the rules, they don't know the protocols. They go into the temple, what are they doing? They've left their shoes on? Did they take the shoes off? How are they meant to behave? You know, what if they don't respect something? They're actually very worried about that. And so they're often hesitant to put themselves in that sort of situation. Deity puja for the familiar, they're very comfortable that they're flocking to have the darshan, to see the temple, even when they don't have a strong internal desire to for what we would consider Krishna consciousness. They still will happily relate to the deity, whereas the non-familiar, many of us were trained to think of this as strange idol worship. The familiar group will respect spiritual teachers. The non-familiar these days, especially kind of in Europe, there's a certain lost respect for religious leaders. Familiar, they understand the Vedic tradition. It's revered. It's got something to offer. Whereas many people in the non-familiar told this is kind of outdated, primitive. You know, what's it got to offer modern life? And another important one, the familiar group have often had at least an upbringing or training or guidance in certain sattvic lifestyle. Whereas for many of the non-familiar, we were conditioned to non-sattvic activities. And that's a tough one that we're carrying with us. And I'm saying with us because I kind of emerged out of the non-familiar audience. And the familiar recognize ISKCON is bona fide. Non-familiar, is it made up religion? Is it a cult?
A cult.
Recently, I found the correspondence between my parents and the people of FAIR in the UK, Family Action Information and Rescue.
Ooh.
And they were
Oh,
feeding
Dominic.
in such nasty, horrible stuff. It was terrible to read this and to know that that's what my parents had been fed. And it damaged relationships. Familiar, Sanskrit, sacred language. Oh, what's this weird ancient tongue, Kirtans and bhajans. This is also a very important one. When people from the non-familiar come to the temple, they're not recognizing the songs. They're being sung in Bengali generally, or some Hindi. And why should I sing in a foreign language? How will I understand what this means? And, how can I feel I can be authentic, through this? And we mentioned family. Familiar may have family encouragement, at least in exploring Krishna consciousness. Often from the familiar side, the message is believe in Krishna, but not too much, and I don't know if it wasn't mentioned, but, I have at least some pedigree in the outreach to the familiar audience. After my initial training, I worked with the cows and then did Sankirtan for some time. I was recruited onto the Life Membership Program. This is the late 70s. And under the care at that time, Jayatirth as the GBC, he gave me very broad scope to broaden what we were doing as a Life Membership. And we recognized that the young people who many other devotees had written off as, the parents may help us because they've got a sense of dharma. These young people are just going to become so polluted by the materialistic society and schooling, they'll never help us. Whereas we recognized they could become devotees. So we started in the late 70s programs, particularly the Mahabharata youth clubs. We were running half a dozen different clubs in different parts of London and Leicester and Birmingham. And then we had summer camps for these kids. We reaped in 1 year, 79-80, we reaped 26 new Gujarati devotees for our movement. This was a first.
Yeah.
And actually it was a game changer for the preaching to the familiar audience, because now when those from the familiar audience who were coming to the temples in the 70s thought everything was really nice, but looked around and saw all these other persons who had emerged from a different psychographic cohort, and they thought, no, this is very nice, but it's not, I don't know, we fit in here, it seems to be for them.
Yeah. But
once we had devotees from the Gujarati, and we had a few Punjabis, and we had a couple of Bengalis, and even Sri Jiva in Assam was one of our boys from then, things changed. People from the familiar background would now come and see persons of their own connection, and feel we can join in. They can understand where I'm coming from, what makes my motivation in coming to Krishna consciousness. And that's the thing. There is two different ways of looking at what is Krishna consciousness, what it means for me, and why I should get involved. Very different between the familiar and the non-familiar. Family encouragement is just one aspect. These young people recognize that getting into their culture, getting into the Vedic ideas, getting into Gita and the Shastra was something that maybe their grandparents had admired their grandparents who did it, but just wasn't sure if it meant anything for them. They know their parents would be happy for them to do it. Whereas with the non-familiars, many of us did not get very much encouragement from our family. Quite the opposite. And the next one is probably the most key. In my kind of analysis of everything we did, I think this next point is the one that makes the big difference. And that is that practically everyone I know who has come from the familiar cohort and taken up Krishna consciousness seriously. They started because they already knew someone in their family or a relative or some friend who was already a devotee. They already had someone tethered in the movement who was pulling them in. It wasn't a question of family pushing. It was a question of generally one individual who they knew and maybe respected was pulling them, saying, please, come on, Sanjay, we need to go to the temple. I've got a festival this weekend. Could you help out with this? And just bringing them in and constantly working on them to keep associating with the devotees until finally they woke up one day and go, yeah, actually, this is really good, this Krishna consciousness. Whereas the non-familiar cohort tends not to know anyone. Where they have, we've actually, over all the years, we'll remember how there's been a certain little group of devotees who joined the temple because one of them was serious and kind of brought along his mates. And that happened even from the 22nd Avenue.
Yeah.
Major Buffalo is legendary. In Britain, the Cardiff devotees, was a whole mob of them joined, and the UK Yatra. So that's a very important one, that most people in the non-familiar category do not know a devotee. So there is no one to pull them into Krishna consciousness. And we'll see how we have to deal with that. Because for the familiar audience, actually, Krishna consciousness is spreading through network marketing. Individuals are pulling in their contacts, their families, their relatives. They're just pulling them in. And we have not got the same system at work within the non-familiar. We can't replicate it in quite the same way, perhaps, but we have to think how to balance it in some way. And so just a couple of other points there. In the familiar, Krishna consciousness related to cultural identity, whereas for the familiar, non-familiar, it's many ways a rejection of family identity. And that's how particularly my mother saw it. She would complain to me. And familiar practices, restrictions, fasting, abstinence in certain ways, these are common. Whereas for the non-familiar, are you serious? Like that? They know what to do for ceremonies and festivals, whereas others find it exotic. It can be beautiful and colorful, but it's still new, strange, and bewildering. And then the last one, of course, you got to mention in your previous podcast, they're comfortable with cultural aspects, and the non-familiar. This is the attitude that I have towards when my wife is trying to get me into cycling. I look at cycling and think, yeah, it looks healthy. It looks like it could be good fun. It could be really good for me. But do I really have to wear the clothes? I don't see myself in lycra.
I wouldn't look good in those.
So I think a lot of people look at Krishna like that. They see us chanting on the streets and think, this is wonderful. Do I have to wear the clothes? Anyway, so let's go ahead and see how we try to deal with all of this. So what we're suggesting is that the path of devotion, it merges as people are transforming and as they adopt Krishna consciousness as their identity. Then it makes very little difference whether they came from a familiar or a non-familiar background. That's the merging point. But up until then, the psychologies are so different. And we need to cater for those early stages when we're taking our new devotee audience, whether familiar or non-familiar, along their path. We're not trying to create parallel movements. Everyone comes together in Krishna consciousness through commitment and advocacy. But in the initial stages, we need to bear these psychologies in mind. Kumar, is there anything else you want to add on that?
And I'd also like to just because I remember in the bigger document there were some more familiar non-familiars that that seemed that demonstrated that ethnicity is not always a indicator, because you'll find people who are ethnically from a say a Indian background, but whose psychology is more in line with those who are not even familiar. They may be familiar with many things, but they identify psychologically with those who are not familiar, and they push it aside, and they don't even in India this is happening.
And what we see these as self-identifying.
Yes.
We don't need to put someone in a particular category. If we have programs that cater for each type, then those who are inclined will find their way. And one of the most powerful statements that keeps coming out when you ask devotees how they came to Krishna consciousness and at what point they thought, this is for me, it's that they said, now I have found my people. And that's not an ethnic demographic issue. That's a psychographic kind of feeling. Right. This is psychology. This is the kind of the outlook and the way of thinking and the way of understanding Krishna that suits me. I can identify with this. That's our challenge.
Yeah, Kumar, any further elucidation on this?
Well, maybe just a last thought or two before we kind of move on. I think I recollect speaking to quite a few particularly inspirational leaders who we'll come to in a moment. We were kind of dubbing some groups as independent progressives, people who are running really kind of modern, kind of in touch with modern culture, independent kind of activities. And some of these very inspirational people, okay, demographically, they happen to be, say, British Asian. And I remember speaking to some of these, a couple of people I've got in mind, these guys, and I remember that there's kind of quite a potent sense of this idea of like using terms like Western. It was kind of, I think the uncomfortableness was that they are very Western. So if I think about my time at university, so I was at university and my group of friends came from lots of different ethnicities, and that was great. We were all in it together, and I think we would all classify ourselves as, Western. We were experiencing a Western lifestyle in a Western university and doing the things that young Western, 18, 19, 20-year-olds do. We were in the same melting pot together. We were all Western. But I think an important thing here is, I believe the term's called intersectionality, but while we're thinking of these Venn diagrams, right? So we've just done one here that's familiar and non-familiar, right? You could also have one that's Western, right? Culturally Western. And it's possible to be culturally Western, and then you can draw the other intersecting circle, which is familiar or non-familiar. So you can have someone who is Western and they're familiar, and you can have someone who's Western and then they're non-familiar. And so the important thing is this familiar, non-familiar. It's not like, oh, it's Western versus something else. Right. I don't know if that kind of contributes to this. And I think some of the older ways of trying to look for, okay, what's going on, were kind of clumsy. Oh, what Western versus something else. And it just didn't really capture it properly.
Great. I think we should move on now to our the 6 sets of initiative, because we've got a couple of other big themes to kind of talk about. So next slide is what is an outreach initiative, and could you go to next? Thank you. And our answer to that is all outreach initiatives are simply opportunities for other people to associate with dedicated devotees. Everything we do is simply an excuse for getting people to associate with the devotees. We go out on Harinam, we go out on book distribution, we have festivals. We're just going out. We want them to meet a devotee because it's in those exchanges and forming some little contact, connection, maybe even relationship with a devotee that is their hope for taking up Krishna consciousness. Sadhu Sangha that's what it's all about. So every outreach initiative is simply an opportunity to get people in the association of devotees and to hold them with us as long as we can and as regularly as we can and as often, and just to keep them coming until the magic happens in their heart. And they go, yep, this is for me. So we divided up, we found 6 sets of initiatives. Could we just knock on a couple of slides until, okay, this is good. So quantity of ways we offer association. So obviously the number of on and off sites, temple centers, online interactions, courses and everything we offer, that's the number. The range of audiences to whom we offer association, the number of devotees involved in these daily and weekly outreach things, the regularity of all these interactions, that's quantity. So that's very easy to work on. And the next one is the quality, the demeanor and character of the devotees in giving association. What training and guidance have we provided for them? The time we invest in giving our association. Supporting devotees is shed so much blood, time, and energy, and worry and anxiety in trying to help others come to Krishna consciousness. The sense of responsibility we have in following up new and old contacts, and circumstances to discuss a person's doubts and misgivings. You know, they're not just there to hear us, we have to hear them. So moving on, requires us individually to be someone's personal friend in Krishna consciousness, and as a community to be seen as a place that offers genuine friendship and a sense of belonging. So we're going to come now to the next slide is the beginning of our 6 initiatives. And what these are, no, go back, just the first. Thank you. We've got 6 groupings of our types of initiatives that need to be in place to take someone from being a person who has never had any connection with Krishna consciousness to a lifelong devotee, a lifer of Krishna consciousness. So the first one is first contact promotion. This we tend to do quite a bit of. This is where we go out and announce ourselves to the public. You know, it's direct. It's Harinam, it's book distribution, it's prasadam distribution, it's food for life, you know, it's festivals. We do it digitally these days as well. We do it personally in all our interactions. We may be doing general things, broadcasting or narrowcasting, but we are making ourselves known. We exist. Here is something that you could explore. So it's first contact promotion. But it's so crucial. Everything else is built on this. But perhaps with our non-familiar audience, we'd be doing a lot of this and not really picking up on the next lot of initiatives. So the next one is, next slide, please. Invitation opportunities. Whenever there is contact, there has to be an invitation with it. We have gone out, we have made contact with them, and now we leave them something that allows them to take a step to us. We have left an invitation in their hands, something that they can take part in. It could be an event, a festival, it could be dropping in some venue, it could be a little center, a sangha, a temple, whatever. There's programs happening at different times that they get to find out, oh, I could go to that, and maybe that's a nice idea. And these can be very simple. We're doing a lot of things, some connected with yoga, some pranayama, Ayurveda. You know, they can be health related, they can be cooking, they can be philosophy, they can be worship. But there's a range of programs that they can be part of. There's different types of groups that they could be part of. There's websites they could explore. There's resources. And of course, there's the books that they can read. That's, even when we give someone a book, that is an invitation opportunity. We're saying, we've come,
Yeah.
giving you this book. Now, please, would you like to read it? And one of the nice initiatives that's happening is the additional help that is being given to the study of Prabhupada's books. So that's another invitation opportunity. So you can gauge how well we're going to start making impact with both familiar and non-familiar audiences by seeing how much first contact promotion we're doing and what invitations, what is the range of invitations that has been offered, and will it pick up on many different subgroups within each of those cohorts? That becomes the question that the centers and temples must ask. And then the next one is connection. If anyone takes up an invitation, we have to immediately make a personal, real, genuine connection with that individual. They have to feel they've met a friend. They've met someone who is wise, happy, and actually seems to care for me and my spiritual life. And so we offer friendship, buddies, mentors, of course, gurus, and we can do this directly. So through social media, a contact database management is really, really important in this, and through communications. But we're creating a connection. So especially with the non-familiar audience, where we said they don't know anyone. There's no one already existing who is naturally pulling them in. We have to create that relationship where if a person doesn't turn up for a sangha or a Sunday feast for a few weeks, the devotee is, it's a perfectly natural thing for the devotee who met them originally to call them and say, oh, I missed you. We haven't seen you for a few weeks. Are you okay? Is everything all right with you? We have to be able to keep encouraging them, because Maya is so wicked. She puts so many distractions and difficulties in their path, and we have to help them, overcome those things and just keep on with their exploration, because it's only exploration at this time. They're in this considering stage of their development. So this is the crucial thing. Without this type of initiatives, actually, there's no further progress. People will come to this point and then just wither away, and no one is there to remind them, please come back. So this is crucial. And then if we establish this, then we've got them on the path for cultivation. This is where they're starting to enjoy association more. There's study, there's practice, there's service. They're exploring a little bit of the sharing and the bliss of Sankirtan or going out to a program or whatever. They're starting to feel the purification in the rituals and the resolutions. We defined cultivation in terms of the 8 S's, which is Sangha is the most important. We're constantly just getting them to have association with us. Svadhyaya, or Shastra, which is spiritual study. Sadhana, at this stage, they're getting involved, maybe chanting even just one round a day. Oh, we heard the great story, chanting just one mantra, 16 mantras, that's great. But but they're starting to complement that with seva, because seva is so important, because it will be done in the association of devotees together, working together. They will feel that energy. Talking about Sankirtan, sharing, and other ones which are important in the cultivation thing is we have to fill out their lives. Sanskriti, the culture. They want to see our art, our drama, our music. They need to have these artistic entertainment aspects of their life also fulfilled in order to keep on with their association. Sanskars are crucial, because this is another way for them to kind of feel that they are making that progress in their spiritual life, that certain things are being recognized in their life, certain landmarks, and it's all being done in relationship to Krishna. And then slowly they come to the point of sankalpa, resolution, where this is personal commitment to the self-discipline of bhakti. So these are the kind of the aspects that must kind of manifest in cultivation. So we're doing that through courses, programs, and mentorship, and all those. And the next one, I personally feel this is something that I'm so pleased to see happening. 30 years ago, after being TP, I embarked, a few of us were trying to set up a little devotee community in Wales. And what manifested from that was a little surprising. We were able to purchase, with the help of some investors, a large property in Wales called Buckland Hall. And we set it up as a retreat center. And at the time it was started, retreats were generally in the Buddhist ashrams and some of the Christian monasteries, and very simple. We were a little bit more upmarket. And but we soon became actually biggest and best retreat center in Britain. And we were hosting a lot of other groups doing things. So I got to see how other groups were using retreat, and talking residential retreats, as the powerhouse for working with their congregations. Many of them didn't have any physical centers. They relied on the quarterly or monthly or annual kind of get-togethers that they could organize through retreats. And what happened was we were able to introduce this in quite a dynamic way within many of the groups in the UK, to show them just how much more impact you can have when you take individuals, particularly whether from the familiar or non-familiar, when you take them away from their background and put them in a place where they go to bed, wake up with devotees, and then suddenly everything is connected to Krishna. And it's not just the programs and the classes, but a lot of the personal interactions that happen, and they meet each other. Whereas when they come to the temple, they can sit in a lecture, they can nod and maybe, take prasadam. They may not have spoken to anyone deeply, but in a retreat, barriers get broken, friendships get made, people start to feel, I belong in all of this. So immersion is a very powerful fast tracking for many devotees. And particularly, it's true from those from the non-familiar audience. They need to get away from their Maya. They need to get away from their other friends who are not interested in Krishna. They need to be with devotees to kind of sense what it could mean for them. So overnight stays in the temples, but actual retreats, taking them away. Woofers is a big thing now. There's working weekends on organic farms. This has been very successful for many temples. I think Australia does it well. New Mayapur in France does it well. The Manor, we're working on the facilities for that. The ashram, Bhaktivedanta Manor has a Be a Monk.
Be a monk, yeah.
Which is a bit of fun, and people, like it, and it gives them that kind of time.
New York, yeah, they do that here in New York too. They've been picking up on that. It's been
Yeah,
quite
it's a
good.
good one. And trips and
Yeah.
pilgrimages. There's many
Oh, yeah.
temples are doing very nice programs and pilgrimages to India. So
Yeah.
then all of that helps. And then we have the last category, which is lifelong devotion. So this is where our centers have to offer care, support, and inspiration, and a deepening experience. Every devotee needs to be deepening their experience as they go through their life. And it will happen naturally, but if we're all being encouraged in our cultivation, in our sharing, in our immersion, then that deepening experience becomes really special to us. Being valued as an older devotee doesn't just mean being appreciated. Wow, you did great in your youth, because that's in many ways, there's a double-edged sword with that compliment.
Now you're useless.
Being engaged, being willing to, that we need your help now. There's this great phrase that if you want to kind of draw someone and gain their trust to engage them, you have to communicate three things: I like you, I value you, and I need you. And it has to be, if that is sincere and genuine, and then any person will respond in their heart to that. That is a very powerful thing. And that's the message that we need for lifelong devotion. And if we have all these 6 initiatives, then you've got a pathway, a very powerful system that will take people from whichever audience to wanting to become a lifer, and we'll have lots more happy devotees. Now, that's maybe I have a couple of thoughts on this, and then we'll take you to how we analyze the manor. These are the 8 S's that I mentioned, but just go keep on the 6th one before. Thank you.
Yeah. It's I really do appreciate this, how you've laid it out in terms of a pathway. Of course, connecting these, and I think that's what's going to come next, is how do you move people who get in from one to the next to the next to the next, and the steps, the how people step forward, and then of course within each of these there's also like this like you connecting this with the previous, the funnel of seeds and contact and considering and transformation, that where the transformation takes place could be in many of these, it could happen anywhere really, and the progress is also, I mean, when you talk about grouping and cohorts, then it's not just the psychographics, it's also there's some other elements involved, in terms of their inner needs and their inner desires, and Krishna talks about that. People are looking for one thing, people are looking for a different thing, people's why they're searching, that also comes into play. So it is challenging, how to make a path for everyone that's flexible enough that everyone finds their place, but systematic enough that they know how to go from one step to the next.
So let us take you to the next phase of the report, and I'm going to hand over to Kumar in a moment. The actual analysis we did, yes. So we looked at the manor, and we identified 45 different outreach activities.
Oh,
just not little things. These were proper programs with, and here they are.
Wow. Looks like it's United
here
States.
They are.
Yeah,
Kumar and his team did a lot of did the interviews, and they were able to identify which was the prime location, the prime emphasis, if you like, for each program. Was it a first contact, an invitation opportunity, a relationship one, a cultivation, an immersion, or a care one?
And you everything fit somewhere. How about
Everything, and there was some that, you know, you may find that some have been listed in the 2 or 3 categories.
That's what I was. Yeah, it seems
because
like
they have a spread like
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
So yes, you know, we were being a bit flexible and we were trying to understand the connections. But this
Now,
is just
I'm curious. As a planner, did you first identify the initiatives and then the categories, or did you already have these categories in mind?
We worked from the path of devotion.
You did.
And we looking at that, and we realized it seems that there's these 6 types of things, and someone else could, you know, probably divide them in a different way. It's like Sankhya.
Yeah.
24 elements, there's 28. You know, there's different ways of dividing it up, but we found these 6 work very well. And I think it's very interesting is to see the analysis that Kumar did. First of all, here's the splatter gun, all the activities in their kind of locations. But then he'll show you how we develop them.
And okay, Kumar, you can explain a little bit the colors and what we're we seeing here.
Well, that's a good question in terms of the colors. It's going to make more sense in a moment.
Okay.
So this okay, I think at this stage different colors were representative of different projects. So I'm looking at it now and I can see
like you have books. The green here is books SSP, books MSF,
yes,
travel SKP, books. All the green there are books in the first one.
But it starts to take form. If you imagine this is just like the scattergun, this is everything. We're not really okay. It's categorized in terms of the path of devotion steps, but really, look, this is all of this is everything that's going on. It's an array, a rainbow, myriad of things happening. So if we move on to the next slide, can we do the next slide? There we go. Okay. So now it's starting to take shape. And now we've divided it by the target audience. So up at the top, we've got the activities that were largely targeting the familiar audience. And the size of the box relates to the volume of activity. So that might be how big it is, how many people is it reaching. Some events, some activities reach a huge number of people, other ones are very small. So the volume is kind of like the number of people it's impacting or reaching.
Right.
And the green ones in the middle is a broad public. So, you know, when Harinam goes out on the street, it's not targeting familiar or non-familiar, it's going for anyone. It's a completely broad brush. So there are certain book distribution, for example, the people standing on the street, they're not targeting people. I mean, who knows, maybe there's some kind of bias that happens, but generally speaking, it's kind of like, hey, hello, who are you? Here's a book. So it's very much the broad public.
Right.
The third category were initiatives that were really trying to reach out to non-familiars. And so everything that we've been discussing in terms of there are differences between these psychographic groups, and of course people who are going out and doing outreach and preaching, they're well aware of this, and so there are naturally some activities that are going out to the non-familiar audience. But you'll see there's definitely a very big asymmetry here, a big weighting that we found as we were analyzing this data.
Right.
Okay, and so this next one, the lines between them, and it's okay that you don't take it all on board because just the overall effect is the actual useful insight here. And so these lines are where one activity legitimately funneled people to the next one. So we were saying, okay, well, how does one, a first contact then tie up and link to the next step, Well, these lines came from interviews where we were speaking to someone who was running a particular event and then saying, okay, so where do you invite people to next? And they'd say, oh, well, this project run by this person, or we send them here, we do this kind of thing. And so this does actually show the pathways. And again, there was a distinct difference here in that in the familiar group, where there was a lot of activities being run for the familiar audience, and there was a lot of sending people. There were so many activities, and actually, the orange basically, as I see it, is a snapshot of incredible success. What's happening there is phenomenal. It's absolutely incredible. It's a vibrant ecosystem of plenty of different opportunities of different sorts, and people running different groups are sending people from one to the other, and people are forming bonds and friendships, and it's just incredible. But you notice how it very much, the network spreads between everything. Whereas at the bottom with the non-familiars, you were asking before if some of these projects, we have put them again in different steps. So if a particular project does the first contact, but then they invite people to their follow-up event, for example, and then they might also run something else. So they are, there are people really trying to think about moving people along, not just that every project is just focused at one point along the path. There are people running initiatives really trying to think about this journey. But mainly what's happening here is that projects are bringing people along that pathway a certain amount of the way, but it's much more insular. It's less networked. People are initiatives are going out. People are meeting people. They're bringing them on board. They're fostering, some relationships. It's going along, but there's not much in the way of that person then, going into some other. There's not an ecosystem there. It's more individual projects. And then you'll also notice in the blue non-familiar group, it kind of tapers off towards the end. So that we can see is another trait of the outreach happening within that group. And something else that is also pretty clear is that there's very little in the way of bridging between these groups, actually. So you'll see the events, the projects that are targeted at non-familiar and those that are familiar, there's not much in the way of overlap, which perhaps to begin with, it would be sensible and appropriate. If people are coming at things with a very different psychographic nature and they feel more comfortable in one place or another, that's probably no bad thing necessarily. But it as you go on, it does tend to then questions arise, because in previous slides I noticed Akhandadhi, you kind of have people coming in, and then by the time they're reaching a more advanced place, the arrows have kind of come together. The psychographics kind of merge together as people get towards the place of, hey, we're all
there was that they came like that as into the
yes, but actually in practice we're not seeing so much of that. So if we go forward one more slide, so if we can go forward to the next one, please. Okay, so this adds one extra data point to this this data visualization, and this is about who's funding or supporting the initiative. I wonder if Akhandadhi, I may bat it over to you. You may have a little sharper
Yeah, actually, this is thank you, Kumar. I thought you made some very, very important points. First of all, yes, let's look at the orange there and the incredible range of activities in each category and the different pathways. So according to an individual, they can find their path. They're zigzagging all over the place to make their progress. This is an incredible machine for generating devotees of Krishna. There's no question. We're not just talking about someone coming and thinking, oh, Krishna's nice. And, maybe we're talking about systems that take them from that initial feeling through serious sadhana training. And the number of initiated devotees emerging from this is just phenomenal. It's so powerful. And if you want to see what building up each of these initiatives work, then the Manor has demonstrated that so powerfully. But our concern was that it really is working for a particular audience. And another aspect, if you see even the green, which are the broad public, many of them seem to be forming connections a little amongst themselves, but a lot into the initiatives of the familiar, which is very good. Something which is a general program like our KC SOCs, which is the university programs happening at dozens places, universities in Britain, is feeding Pandavasane and making devotees and, like that. So, but not so much connections into the programs that would help the non-familiar groups make progress. Now, the data point that Kumar mentioned that's relevant in this particular slide is these three symbols. Circles are where the project is manor managed, generally on site. The squares are where it is supported. The manor supports that activity in some way or other. And the triangles are the independents. Now, we see that for the familiar cohort, it's manor managed and manor supported practically entirely. And that's true of the broad public as well. Whereas when we get into the non-familiar, there are a lot of triangles in that and very few circles, very few even squares. Not to say the manor isn't trying, but there's not a lot of activities. And for the most part, a lot of the outreach activities, both first contact and invitation opportunities particularly, and their kind of initial cultivation is happening off-site. It's happening in venues dotted around London. We've got Studio 108, Om Nom, the restaurant, the Mantra Lounges. There's different things happening. Kirtan London runs programs, and these are run by, and it was Kumar's phrase, the Bhakti progressives. These dynamic devotees who kind of think there's other ways of preaching, and we heard a lot about those last week as well. And this is exciting. This is really exciting stuff. The question is how to keep developing those individuals. And what we have found is that there is practically zero connection between these initiatives in blue at the bottom and the manor. The only ones that are really connected to the manor are what we call Krishna Wisdom, which is a program runs at the manor. They're now doing Saturday afternoon open days for new people, and they do a Tuesday evening online Sangha and a Wednesday class. It's been running for many years. It's successful. The devotees are doing it, are very dedicated to it, but it's fairly limited, we have to say. And it's not a wide range of invitation opportunities. And the situation is, and this becomes one of the challenges that I think will be faced. That the devotees, these bhakti progressives, doing very well cultivating individuals, bringing them into Krishna consciousness, into the environment in a particular way, with maybe certain emphasis on certain things and certain non-emphasis on other things. And they wonder, how do they fit into the manor? How do they fit into the temple? I can't just tell them to go and visit the manor. Will they have the experience that will help them, or will something happen that might think, oh, they don't want to be part of this anymore? Now, the manor has been very, very good about being a venue where groups, off-site groups, can run a day or an afternoon or an evening at the manor. But all of those programs are highly curated, protected, where the devotee in charge of that group brings them, as a group, has a particular space at the manor in the New Haveli buildings, runs a program just for them and completely controlled. And there's really very little interaction between those devotees and the rest of the manor. And they're not assimilated into it. And there isn't the sort of programs that they could tend to get involved with through service and association. So this is the kind of challenge that we wanted. We wanted to see, can the manor become relevant? Because for most of the Bhakti progressives, the temples are not relevant to them. And
interesting.
That's, I think, that's the challenge that really has to be worked on. If the blue ones are where the actual relationship with that cohort is happening, and we're not connecting them to the temples and to the opportunities for further development and cultivation and care and service, I think will happen is that people will be with us for some time and feel they're not making further progress. And at a certain point, for the non-familiars, if they kind of feel, well, I've done this for 6 months, I've done this for a year, I kind of got what I'm going to get out of it. I'll try something else now. What's next on the spiritual list to try, and off they go to something else. We need, it's got to be a continuing process of deepening realization for them.
This kind of threw up an interesting existential question about the function of the temple and the manor. Because many people who were running, fantastic independent programs and cultivating, meeting like the non-familiar audience where they were in, maybe in London, and doing events where the non-familiar audience would come together and they'd feel a part of it and they'd feel the belonging. The people who were running that felt quite tentative and nervous about the idea of giving an open invite. Oh, just go to Bhaktivedanta Manor, because they're fearful of what the experience of those new individuals will be. They maybe get to the manor and suddenly they're seeing signs with maybe kind of Sanskrit or jargony words, and perhaps people in Birkenstocks and socks with dhotis walking around, which I'm making a bit of fun there, because that's my recollection of growing up in Gurukul and the manor, but Birkenstocks and socks, but for people who are not familiar and they arrive and it's kind of like, okay. And so the people running and cultivating relationships with these newbie non-familiars, they're worried about them coming to the temple. And so the existential question was, quite a few people we spoke to, some people were like, well, the manor's almost become so established and successful in its ability, in what it's doing with a familiar audience and an established ISKCON old school community, and maybe it's too much difficulty to change it into a place where you could just give an open invite and a newbie unfamiliar walks in and feels welcome and feels, okay, wow, this is cool, let me continue my journey. So the existential question is, do we just actually leave the manor to be this place that's fantastic with a familiar audience and an established ISKCON audience, and do something completely different? And should we have other centers that are, or do we try to make the manor a place that the house that can somehow be home to these different groups comfortably without attention? So that's a big existential question.
Okay.
Live.
So on that was thank you, Kumar. And on that basis, we kind of proposed that a key aspect of what seems to be missing for not just the non-familiar newbies, if you like, but also even for the established devotees resident around the manor, ex-ashramis who still live near the manor and regarded as their place of worship. They don't have a weekly worship event. They've got the morning program, yes, but they don't have a weekly worship event, a Sunday feast.
Yes.
Now, there is a Sunday feast. In fact, there's 2 Sunday feasts cooked, midday and later in the afternoon for the familiar audience. And not even all of them. It's actually for those who are willing to go, and listen to classes. So it's a further very good management of the attendees on a Sunday from the familiar audience and getting them funneled into cultivation through the Sunday feast. Very, very good. But there is nothing that the non-familiar can really join in on a Sunday. We do get visitors popping in, from that. And there are hospitality devotees who give them a little tour and show them everything. And the reaction is fairly standard, that they come and they think, wow, this place is amazing. It's so beautiful, it's well organized, and it's everything is so pucka. And the devotees are really nice, and they see everyone's happy, and they just think, yeah, this is fantastic. But it is for them, isn't it? I can't see anyone I can, who would be my friend here?
Yeah.
Families are talking different language. There's different things. It just doesn't feel that they can find their people here in those events. So Sundays was not an option. So what we suggested is we need to dedicate Saturday afternoons and Saturday evenings to kind of creating an environment for the non-familiar audience. I remember Vaisheshji talking about this sometime when he was talking about his particular frogs and their protected species having its own little enclave. You have to, if you want them to thrive, you're just going to need to protect them, little area. So we wanted to create a little protected area around the non-familiar audience for Saturdays evenings, and to create a worship event, a Sunday feast, and in which case it would be a Saturday feast. Right. But with the elements that Prabhupada set up, bhajans, a nice talk, kirtan, and incredible prasadam. That's the process. It's not old school, it's timeless. That is the process for creating an invitation program that when people wake up on a Saturday morning and think, I'm not going to miss that. And a weekly worship event is crucial. And even with the programs that are going on within Krishna West, it's nice, it's a little association, a little class, but it's not a worship event. Every human being, and you see it in all the religions, there has to be some kind of rhythm to the life where at least once a week, someone does something to purge their soul from all their activities and their shame and their guilt and their kind of anxieties, as something that takes them out of themselves and just kind of, I walk out and I feel cleaner now that I had that event. And even as we oldie devotees, we need that as well.
Yeah.
I'm situated here in Zurich. We've got a lovely temple. It runs 2 Sunday programs, one at midday, mainly for those from the, if you like, the familiar audience, particularly a Tamil background. They have their own class. They have their own kirtan. It's created in their language. They have a particular feast that suits their tastes. They're very happy. And then in the afternoon, we have a program that is basically the non-familiar group. With there's a little mixing, and that's fantastic. But it's something that both old and new can be part of together.
Mm.
And the manor, I think that is the key one, that if we thought there was one thing that could be done, that's still the target that I think is needed. It would fit in with the, in one sense, it's an invitation opportunity, and it has to be absolutely regular, the same every week. And that's the way we all remember. You could, when you're on Sankirtan, whatever temple you're connected with, you could always say, look, Sunday, such and such a time, great program. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
No one has to look online. No one has to book. No one has to kind of they just know. And the devotees know how to promote it because it's every week, it's there, and it's good, And if it became something that both seasoned devotees and newcomers could be there and enjoy a really uplifting program that made them feel really good about themselves and sharing in Krishna consciousness, that would be a huge help, because we don't want just to cater for all the new folk coming along and cultivating. We have to care for them. We've got to cater for our seasoned devotees who are not finding quite how they fit in within the current programs. So that was our kind of one target. Something is happening on Saturdays, which is going to be more of a one-off opportunity for newbies. But sorry, I'm calling them that, for newcomers to Krishna consciousness. But we need more. We need to create, and we thought that by creating that one event that could be trusted, then the off-site independents would see there is one time of the week, one program that we can send our people to and know that they will have such a nice experience that will enhance and encourage and fix them even that little bit more in Krishna consciousness. And it would build up the trust between the off-site initiatives and what the temple is offering. That was that's still our hope.
Good.
I think they have.
Want to run through, because I'm building up a list of questions, and we're already into an hour and a half practically. And I was thinking maybe if there's a few more slides, or are we just going to, can we jump into some things?
We have some specific pathways, but you can make these.
Yeah, this is going to be
or the shortened version.
If you're on YouTube, it should be the link to these documents is there in the description of the Ananta, if you can maybe just put a note there that you can go to the description. I mean, you can't click on this video. We're not at that stage yet. That while you're watching it, click here and you'll get it. But if you are watching on YouTube, you can go to the description, and we'll have it in the Facebook also in a comment there. And you can download the whole document, which describes everything, and also this PDF too. You'll have. So we have a theme 5: outreach analysis, specific pathways. So you want to run through that quickly?
Kumar, this is your territory.
You'll need to go ahead. It's been a little while, and I've not been checking what your slides were, Akhandadhi Prabhu. So,
okay, we'll just show some examples of what we consider to be ecosystems. Could you run the next slide then? So, Sankirtan, book distribution, Harinam. These are first contact activities. And you can see them. Oh, we've lost the slides.
What happened? Okay. Let's see.
So these are first contact. And what we were trying to do is check how well they were connecting through other programs. And
I know, but our tech support fellow who's running the, we're in 3 continents, one of which is India, and I think something happened with his connection. So I'm going to pull up the.
I would suggest that these other slides are things that people can look at.
Okay, they can look at it. They basically show the. They're interesting. I did find them very interesting, but I want to hone in because we've been, this has been a really great overview of the work that you've done, and I think it resonates with most devotees considering how do we fulfill the mission of our movement to spread this to every town and village. Our first podcast with Jai Krishna some time back, we went into their rhino goal of getting millions of people, at least 2 to 3 times the number of familiars in Canada and in America to become familiar, to get to the point where they're chanting the holy names of Krishna and connecting. I know that this. Okay, so Ananta's back. So Ananta Shesh, for now we're going to just go into questions, so you can take the slides off. Okay, so I know that this whole exercise was focused on the manor, and it was great that how you concluded that. Well, I really appreciated your point about a worship program. I know that there's some of the people watching this may be familiar with the work of somebody named Andy Stanley in America, who wrote about building communities around a Christian model. And they talked about how the Sunday program, the Sunday service, that's to celebrate, that's to get together, but that spiritual growth takes place in small groups, but that both are needed. And so I think the way you've defined that is quite good. It's especially, as you say, it's especially needed to glue a community together. But why the manor? What about other places? I mean, it's not easy to get to the manor for most people in the London area. Couldn't the same type of activity be hosted in a rented church or something like that?
Yeah. And I think Kumar raised that question, that some devotees were suggesting that, maybe we should be looking at a different venue, which is particularly catered for the non-familiar. And there's good argument for that. The manor has the deities. The manor has the most beautiful deities. But from my point of view, Radha Gokulanandaji, and of course,
they are very beautiful. There's no doubt.
No
Although
question.
someone, I think, told me that when Srila Prabhupada was asked, he named Radhalandini Shara.
No, well, what he said was, Radha Gokulananda are perfect,
but
Krishna in London, such a sweet boy.
Okay.
So yeah, no, Prabhupada definitely had a special
yes.
heart for Radhalandineshwara. We want to take people to the extreme of their own Krishna consciousness. We want to. It's wonderful when we see someone taking interest in Prabhupada's books and starting to chant and starting to want to do something with the devotees. That's exciting, and we want to encourage them. But we all want for them to come to the point where they just fall at Krishna's feet and understand, Krishna, I'm yours.
Mm. Mm.
I'm surrendered, and you're my shelter. And the relationship with the deities is crucial. We know Prabhupada established the deity worship to help, particularly our impersonalism of of the Western world, and it's such an important aspect. Now, can that be established in other centers? Yes, and it needs to be built up. As well as being a trustee of the Manor, I'm a trustee of Cardiff, ISKCON in Wales. We have just completed and received the keys after nearly 18 months of renovation to our £5 million project that's based in Cardiff Bay. This is, if you want to see how to implement these different activities, then I believe ISKCON Cardiff is showing the way in a small center. They have a full ashram.
Sounds like an episode in the making.
They are probably the only temple that I know that I would call demographically consistent, meaning that when you sit in the programs, their kirtans, their classes, and look out at the audience in front of you, it reflects the same balance of demographics of the city that they're in. Demographically compliant. I think all our temples should be demographically compliant or psychographically compliant.
DEI or
yeah. So, and the other amazing point about this temple is they have a complete integration in their book distribution. They are by far the most enthusiastic. Other temples will start to complain to me now in the UK. They are one of the biggest contributors to BBT in the UK. And they do it through really good connections on the street, giving invitations both to the new temple, which is just been fixed up, but we have an off-site little cafe in the center of Cardiff. People come there. There's programs 2 or 3 times a week there in a neutral situation, perfect for the non-familiars and as initial opportunities. From there, they get to go to visit the temple. They've developed retreats. They've developed the Devamrita Maharaj's concept of kind of loft programs, and also the contemporary Vedic ashram, the kind of halfway houses. And this way, they're bringing people into the ashrams. So many new devotees. It's not true that young people won't take up Krishna consciousness. It is happening. So I see that they are an example of these 6 initiatives working with synergy and integration in a way that actually is so effective. And it is really built on book distribution and so much kirtan and great prasadam. And the other amazing thing about Cardiff, this 5 million between the Welsh Government, Cardiff Council, and other grant bodies in Cardiff. They received over £1 million to build the temple, not to do some other kind of charitable thing, to build a temple in one of the most...
That's right. Now we really have a show. If that could be ISKCON's future forward, that sounds like very bright.
On ISKCON Cardiff, that's one. So I see that this is happening. It's happening even in the UK. The potential is huge. London can, and I think London is starting to fire up as well. So watch these spaces.
Okay, so the point you're drawing us to is that connecting with Archa is a fundamental stepping point for a devotee's lifetime surrender. Let's go back in these steps. Let's go back into this because I think what I've been hearing throughout this presentation is that a few things. Okay, first of all, you very nicely laid out these stages. There's 6 steps or 6 initiatives that bring people forward, and that everyone needs to go. In other words, it's in order to get to the point of being a lifelong, being surrendered, being committed, then you need to go through these things. In this path, how do you feel making the connection with Srila Prabhupada fits in? Is it, and I'm not talking about just familiarity, becoming familiar with Prabhupada by, or just familiar with his books, reading something, but an actual personal connection. And in that way, a personal connection with Sampradaya, because you talked about the idea of belonging, and this is my tribe, and that's exactly the concept of Sampradaya. It's a community. It's a specific, and especially when we talk about within the familiars even, this is important, because when you talk about the familiars, they're aware, they're familiar with multiple sampradayas, multiple communities, even within the Vaishnava tradition. And we have our specific Gaudiya Sampradaya. So how does that connect with all of this?
Well, let's just say for the non-familiars, they've also got an array of gurus, and they may not understand that they are different sampradayas. They just think they are different spiritual teachers, and so they have lots of others to choose from. And what makes their appreciation of Srila Prabhupada stronger is when they see the impact that Prabhupada has on the devotees. When they meet a devotee who is enlivened, happy, intelligent, and knowledgeable and realized thanks to the connection with Prabhupada, they want to be part of that.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they're looking for. So it's a lot of how we present Prabhupada is through them seeing what Prabhupada has done for us in our lives,
right.
and how we deal. To give Cardiff as an example, of course, they're big on the book distribution. They're giving Prabhupada from the beginning and engaging with them in courses and programs for developing people's appreciation. The temple, of course, is dedicated, and we've just commissioned the Murti of Srila Prabhupada for the Vyasasan and Gaur Nitai for the altar. So it will have those elements of worship. And even while we were trying to develop the building, and it was a construction site for so long, we got the use of a property across the road just by Krishna's arrangement, where we've been continuing to have programs several times a week, cultivating the devotees. And so we have the responsibility personally of representing Srila Prabhupada, and people will look to us to say, what has Prabhupada done for you? Mm-hmm. And therefore, what can he do for me? That's how people will calculate.
I'm considering the time. I want to try to get a few more questions in. And Kumar, I think maybe you're best suited to answer this one, because there's a big debate in our society about dress and appearances. I'm here in New York. I frequent 2 venues. Here, of course, I'm here living here in the Radha Govinda ashram, so I'm here, mostly. But I go every week to the Bhakti Center, which is across in Manhattan, and which is when I look around there, I do see probably what you described as demographically consistent. Uh, it's it's fairly demographically consistent, I would say. Uh, Although, to be demographically consistent in New York, which has got such a diversity, is a challenge. But how do you see in this programming and these initiatives and these offer and venues, et cetera, the role of how devotees dress? What do you see? I mean, here in our podcast, you've got two old guys, with kurtas.
Yeah, well,
You look more familiar to probably a lot of the non-familiars.
I appreciate you asking me, and I can certainly not offer any sort of prescriptive stance on what's actually happening, because, I mean, interestingly, I actually consider myself a bit of a marginal. We're considered, the jivas are the marginal energy, right? Kind of
Yeah.
on the boundary between the spiritual and the material energy.
Yeah.
But even me, I feel kind of marginal among the jivas. I went to Gurukul, and then my life went out into the wide world, into the non-familiar world, and my friendship groups have been there, and I've kind of lived mainly within that world ever since. I have my minimal sadhana, I call it like an MVP version, minimal viable product of my sadhana and stuff. And I'm actually very far from the nearest center at the moment. Interestingly enough, Cardiff is probably my closest center now. So I think I'm a kind of subgroup within the devotee community, which is kind of interesting, because as we've been having this conversation, I'm kind of thinking, well, what do I need? Because I'm a bit aloof, but I say I'm marginal because I'm not completely gone. I'm not haven't floated off. I've got friends who grew up and went to Gurukul, and now they've kind of very much distant and not much interest in Krishna consciousness. And then perhaps there are other Gurukulis who are very much still involved, but I'm kind of on the margin, right? So I can't offer you any sort of advice on what should be being done, though my sense is that we're talking about having different types of programs run by different people so that they can attract people of all walks of life. It was just this morning, there's a local church, and I walked past the local church and had a sign out the front, and the sign said, "Wherever you've been, wherever you're going, you're welcome here."
Yeah.
And I like that. I thought, yes, that is the mood, And so, I can't answer you exactly, but my sense is that there may be space for both.
Yeah.
Not one to the exclusion of the other. That I suppose that's my take.
I'll give me my personal experience. I say I go to the Bhakti Center for Thursday night kirtans. Now, addressing your point, Akhandadhi, the Thursday night kirtan in the Bhakti Center is, you could say, they do have something on Sundays, but this is really, I would say, their weekly worship program, because it's in the temple room of the Bhakti Center. The deities are there. The deities do receive arti. There is prasadam at the end. There isn't any lecture. There is often a little talk in between, little, like last night when we were there, one of the prime ladies who helps run that Thursday night program, she gave a little lila katha interspersing with the kirtan, because the focus is on kirtan. The focus is on 2 hours of chanting. And I've often thought that if the organizer, the MC, who at the moment is Ananta Govinda, if he were dressed like me, and I'm probably one of the only ones there, I look around and I think I generally am the only one dressed in a dhoti and a kurta. if I stood up there and I was addressing, in a Dhoti and Kurta, this group, that I would be unfamiliar, and I would be setting myself apart from them just by my dress. I could say whatever I like. I could, it could be, put on I don't have a New York accent, but I could try, use some New York allusions or whatever. But it would be different. So I could sense how, that to give people that sense of belonging that you describe, Akhandadhi Prabhu, that because that's the Krishna. I don't want to give a name, Krishna West or whatever. That's not the argument around dress. Is what you pointed out. Do I have to wear those clothes? It is when the seniors, when the leaders, when the people who are emceeing, the people who are organizing, when they're dressed differently than the people that are being invited, then the hidden message, even if it's not real, is that to come up or to get to where I am, you also should dress like this. Now, I don't think that happens perhaps in other organ where the priests dress differently, but anyway, it's one of the, probably we'll have to have another podcast on this whole topic. But so I'm glad it's a good little touching on that point.
Yeah, I think it's very important to have the plurality of situations, and even in one situation to have plurality of the behavior and dress of the devotees.
Yeah.
And I still think that even with the non-familiar audience, even with the certain attitudes that there are towards religious institutions, still, if an individual has shown commitment to their spiritual path to the point where that is represented in their role as a teacher or a minister or a priest to someone, and that is then reflected in the way they dress, then I think that's often something that is individually honored. And I think the balance in a situation such as the Bhakti Center is where the leader of the audience, the leader of the group, who is trying to ensure that they are, everyone feels comfortable, may dress as one of them. But they might say, we are very honored that we have His grace.
Yeah. And I never feel out of place, by the way, when I'm there.
Under Prabhupada all these years, let him, we'd like to hear some of his thoughts and realizations. Everyone would be very respectful.
Yeah, and it's the same thing happens when Radhanath Maharaj is there, or so on. So I think that's the that is there.
So as well. I think that people are not always looking for the sameness. They're not always attracted to something because it's the same as them, and at the same time, if they feel they belong in the place and they feel welcome there, then both can be true. Here's someone who does look different from me. I'm interested. What's their path? How have they got to here? But also, I feel welcome. I'm looking around. I'm okay here. I belong here. I think the two can both be together. Yeah.
Now, in the beginning of your presentation, you flagged two things: synergy and integration. But in the presentation, it seemed that there wasn't. You didn't find a lot of integration. And you didn't find in terms of these three cohorts, the familiar, the non-familiar, and then this broad, public mix. How, where does this, because I'm a little confused here, because on the one side it seems that for the non-familiar, although I think you pointed it out, Kumar, that how that there was this slide which showed the non-familiar and the familiar, two arrows, and then they kind of merge at one point, and is that the point of the synergy that we're talking about? It's not this one, it's
No,
way back.
yeah, it's. I think that is much more psychologically. We kind of are
Back
related.
further if you want to.
It goes back to the double lines very early on. It's not these type of ones. Okay, we'll get there. Yeah, keep going. Go.
No, this is it.
Yeah,
Boy, we're really in the beginning here.
You did go.
There it is.
yes, this is much more where in the individual's paths where they've kind of come through transformation to the point of adopting Krishna consciousness as their, then they kind of identify a devotee as a devotee.
Right,
you know?
right.
And that's really the psychological. But in terms of the practicalities of synergy and integration, the report was commissioned on the base that there was a strong feeling that there probably wasn't much synergy or integration. And that's what we were exploring. What are the connections between all these different programs? How much do they even know about what else is going on? And we found that was a big issue, that most people were not aware of what others were doing and what other opportunities that existed. And we'd always ask each group two key things. Who feeds you and who do you feed? You know, which programs are feeding devotees to your program, and which programs are you feeding your devotees to explore onto? And that was the key analysis. And some of those later slides we didn't get into, which are in the report, show the different what are called ecosystems, areas where you would think these programs would be very closely related and working very closely together. And even then, where there should be a natural relationship between one program and the next, there wasn't a lot of understanding. And sometimes it's just not knowing. And sometimes there's a kind of trust. We're not quite sure we wanted our folk to go on to that and whether they're going to have a good experience. So a lot of work has to be done from leadership and from those from a position of just helping devotees understand, communicate, and trust one another.
Okay.
And where that happens, it's powerful.
Yeah. Well, it seems, that this is all work in progress, and that exploring the ways in which to tailor the messages too. We didn't really get into that too much in terms of language. We talked about, but I guess it just comes about naturally when your program is designed for people who are not familiar with terms, Vedic terms and Vedic things and so on, then you're going to obviously want to use more familiar terms. So in tailoring the language that's used, tailoring the venue that's used, tailoring the timing, the environment, all of that goes into it. And I'm interested to see, further down the road how that integration and I think this synergy, how to maximize that. And I guess the point you were making about synergy in the Manors case is that here you've got the Manor, you've got this amazing facility, you've got this extraordinary deities, such a wonderful, beautiful place in so many respects. The cows are there too, by the way. And they have a lot of blessings to offer. And yet, it's primarily focused on catering to a familiar audience, but the facility could be used more, could be expanded and used in other ways. And is that the kind of synergy that you're talking about, where you have resources and you expand their use, or you connect them? I'm trying to understand a little bit more about the synergy concept here.
Yes, the difficulty that there is in terms of building synergy for the non-familiar audience at Bhaktivedanta Manor particularly is that there are not enough invitation opportunities. They're trying to expand that, and there are some very good initiatives and developments that will take place in the coming years to increase the number of first-time opportunities for people to visit and have a great experience. But we have to build up some of the other aspects as well. We don't just want people to come, have a nice visit and think, that was a nice place.
Yes. Okay.
Haven't made a connection and with a devotee who is going to help them advance in their spiritual life to be a lifelong devotee. That's what's needed.
Great. I made a presentation once about the learning organization and how difficult it is sometimes to break down the silos that people end up in, and they're working. They don't know what's going on the other side, and they're comfortable with that. So but to actually have a true learning organization, then that networking and that integration and synergy, where people have, of course, shared vision is another very, very important element. But that's a whole other podcast, learning organization. I think, considering that we've gone for 2 hours, and I think it's you probably are also feeling the time that we can wind up here. This is one of those podcasts where I am very happy if anyone stays on watching us for this long. I've enjoyed it completely, and I've learned a lot. And I think there's seeds for many more discussions on this, expanding it into other venues, looking at other places. Your Cardiff sounds like someplace I'd like to explore, because this challenge is there throughout our society, throughout the society, even in places like India, where you may think, well, everyone's familiar. It's still not. It's not. There still are major psychographic cohorts. That,
even you've got to consider that there's tens of thousands of spiritual seekers flooding into India even these days.
Yes. Yes.
And we're not reflecting that in our...
aside from the international, I'm talking about the Indians, or if you look at the number of the differences between different organizations and how they present spirituality in India, then you also see great differences. So it's quite something.
Look,
but anyway, we have to keep going on this, because this is, and not to call it, use the term, but we do pray to Prabhupada every day, Paschatya Desh. So maybe we can, however we want to translate that, familiar or not familiar, but it's the not familiar. The people who, and it wasn't in England that Srila Prabhupada was asked about outreach to the familiar, and he said, "Well, they're familiar; they already know about Krishna. We have to reach those who don't." So
there's no
this is our challenge.
Prabhupada had a mind that we should look after the familiar audience from the Manor, no question.
Yes.
I implemented a couple of interesting little projects that he had specifically said, like, for instance, organizing a coach from Wembley.
Okay, yeah.
So
and they deserve it. I mean, it's their temple. Without them, we would not have the Manor. So.
Well, in one sense, it's a non-familiar gift.
That's true too. That's true.
Yeah. So
but at least the road. At least the road is. We can thank them for that. But so thank you, Kumar. Thank you, Akhandadhi Prabhu. We're going to wrap up. We're going to be. This will be online. Again, to the audience, you can click on go to the description. You'll get a link to the document that we've been talking about. And we invite your questions and comments. Let's continue this dialogue offline, and let's keep it going, because we need to achieve our Prabhupada's mission, to systematically propagate spiritual knowledge to society at large, and to educate all people in the techniques of spiritual life in order to address the imbalance of values in life and achieve real peace and unity in the world. That's ISKCON. Thank you very, very much. Kumar, give my love to Sri Kama and Kishore when you see them.
Thank you, sir.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Jai
Krishna.
Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada.
Jai.